see this? Got a whole bunch of these that weren't in there far enough.
Okay.
So that's going to be a problem. It's not so bad if it bridges between good ones, but like here when we slid it down, it was resting on that weak one there.
So it's better to use a 5-inch screw and risk and cut a little deeper than to risk them wobbling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You want? We're trying to make a good, stable, even cut. And if our base is not stable, we're not going to make an even cut.
Yeah. Okay.
See how it dipped right here when we moved that thing? So that went pretty doggone good. No difficulties there. The only thing that did happen is Carl used some short screws on that, trying to keep them as simple as possible and keep from cutting as deep as he could. And that rind on that log is kind of soft there where it's rotten, and some of those lag bolts got a little wobbly on there, but all in all, it didn't do any damage. That's why we bridge them. That's why we put more lag bolts out, is so we can bridge the bad ones. Well, it worked out pretty good. We got a nice cut on that. I think I'll roll it 90 degrees and we'll get it set up for another cut. One of the things you got to watch on these first cuts where you're cutting round, there's a guide on that one post there will pull the bar in flush to the flat spot on the log when you're cutting the log. But when you don't have a flat spot on the log, that's going to ride on the round, and sometimes that acts as a ski and it'll follow the curve of the log up and make the saw cut a little bit crooked. It'll make the power head go up a little bit as it follows the curve of that log. You got to really watch that, and by turning the bar, canting the bar so that the end of the bar, the roller nose end of the bar, leads the power head, then that helps mitigate that a little bit. That makes it a little bit easier to keep from that happening. Oh, anyway, that is one log cut, one cut made on that log, so that's two faces on there. Now I got to get that all taken apart and get ready for the next cut, try to figure out what we're going to do with it. If I cut down for a 6-inch cant on that now, my blade is not going to be wide enough for that. There's not going to be enough room between the uprights on the guide for that. So I've got to do some calculating here and figure out what I'm going to do next. Now in the past, before I got the bandsaw mill, I would have taken a slab like that and rolled it over, flipped it over 180 degrees on top of this slab, and then taken the sawmill and run down that slab and taken a board off of it. But I've got the bandsaw mill now, so it's easier for me to just take that over and set it on the bandsaw mill, and I could run down it and slice a board off of it on it like that. I'd only get a 1-inch board off of that, and then it'd have wane on both sides. But for right now, I'm just going to go pick it up and stick it over in the slab pile and get it out of the way. I've got that log set up for another cut now. I rolled it over 90 degrees onto that first face that we cut. I can cut off the third face over here, and that'll whittle it down to the point where I can start getting the chainsaw mill down through that. So in the spirit of not compounding errors, I took the square, measured up from that first face cut that we made. That way this top cut should be parallel with that bottom cut. If we'd have went and tried to square it off of that side face, that second cut that I made, then any error that was made between the first face and the second face would be compounded on the third face, so that this cut then will be parallel with the bottom cut. It's not just going to be in a plane with it, but it's going to be parallel with it. So looking at it, I think I probably should get the power washer out and wash this down, this side of the log down, because it didn't get washed. This was on the bottom when we washed everything, and it's got a little bit of dirt on it. So I think I'll get the pressure washer out and wash that down, and then I still have to take the chainsaw over to the hanger and touch those teeth up a little bit. That cut went smooth as butter through there, and I could probably make a second cut just fine, but it's easier on everything if I go ahead and just polish those teeth up a little bit. I took that slab off that third face yesterday. It's still kind of big for the bandsaw mill, but the bandsaw mill cut so crooked on there with that much cut through there that I'm just going to go ahead and finish breaking that down with the chainsaw mill. So that's just right at 30 inches between those two sides, the first face and the third face. So I don't need to set up any guides or anything on there anymore. I got the flat face on there, the number 2 face on there is flat. We just use it to make our next cuts. So I'll set the chainsaw mill up for 5 3/4, and that'll give us exactly 5 3/4 inch cants off there. I'll take at least 2 of them off there, and then we'll go from there. See if I want to take the rest of them off there or put it on the mill. But That cut is just beautiful. That is flat and smooth as it could be. The best cut yet. And that's what happens once you get everything set up right. You run into a few knots coming through it, and the saw would hit those knots and bog down a little bit, but they're small knots, and back off on pushing on the saw a little bit, and it goes right through. And then as soon as it gets through the hard knots, it bites into the soft wood, and then at Katie bar the door, it just wants to go. So now I've got my first cant off of there. That can be stood up edgeways. That'll slice up real nice on the bandsaw mill. That was really cutting really nice, so I could probably go ahead and make my second cant on there, make another cant on there without any problem. But I'm going to go ahead and take the file and just touch that chain up just a little bit again. Okay, I'm going to set things up and tune up my saw and move that cant, put that cant on the forks. Maybe I'll put it over on the mill, I don't know. Anyway, I'll get ready to make another slice. Well, another beautiful cut cant. I'm going to wait to flip that one off of there. It's at the right height to work on it. So I'm going to let the saw cool off, and then I'll put shut it off, and then I'll put the saw up there on the cant and sharpen the chain when it cools off there. Good time to take a break now. I'll let the saw cool off. I took care of the saw before I moved that last slab that I cut, because it is up higher and a more comfortable elevation to work at. Now we're getting down to where it's getting fun now. If I had some kind of a table or something to lift that up on to get it up a little higher, I would take advantage of it. But now you got to start bending over. But what I do now, instead of just pushing on the saw on the Alaska sawmill portion of it, is I'll go ahead and stand up a little bit more and put my knee, my leg, up against the power head and push on it. That way you don't have to bend over quite so much. So let's get the saw started and make another cut. And it's to the point now where I could put this on the mill the way it is, slice it up into cants there. And I probably will after this next cut, because I don't want to bend over that far making that last cut. Getting too old and crippled up for that. We'll see. Anyway, I moved the extra posts that I had down there that I'd rolled that log over on before. Move those out of the way as they're getting down lower, and you want to clean out your path that you're working on so you don't have anything to stumble over. I don't know, maybe I'll go ahead and make one more cut on there. That's going pretty good. Saw's cutting good. The biggest problem I have with it is getting it started again after it's set for a while. I think it's vapor locking. It's down on hot, and the engine gets hot and stuff, and I think it evaporates all the fuel out of the carburetor. So I got that piece whittled up. Now I got to figure out how I'm going to get it over there on the forks on the Bobcat. Use the wisdom of the ages, the wisdom of the pyramids to move it over and get it over out of the way. But that thing is way too heavy for me to carry to hold the load on that. I don't know what that piece weighs, 400 or 500 pounds, I guess. Anyway, it weighs more than I want to pick up. So I'm gonna let everything cool off again for a while, including me. Wife said she's making a sandwich, so we'll wait for that, have a little bite to eat, and get some energy in me, and then I'm gonna look at that and see. I'm thinking about going ahead and cutting that one more time, one more cant off of that, but it may be, I have to look at how the wood is on that. Anyway, we'll see. Well, the farther down I got into that chunk after we got through the heart, the bigger the knots got on it, which is typical. They start out small when they start growing and they get bigger as they come out. Well, anyway, it cut right through them. Didn't have near as much trouble on this one as I did that first log. I had figured out how to sharpen that chain and corrected the mistakes that I made with that chain grinder. So it cut through there pretty good, cut pretty fast. Now I've still got good wood in this last piece, this last slab that's laying there on the ground, but that's as far as I'm going to go with the chainsaw mill. I'll finish that piece up with the bandsaw mill after I get the rest of these whittled down. Now if I was going to cut these into finish boards and tip them up on edge, I could put two cants together, clamp them together so that they're all the same size and everything, and double cut it. But I would go ahead and put a shorter bar on there and put my shorter sawmill stuff, or maybe go with the smaller saw to cut through that. I've also got a Haddon lumber maker that I used. I could use it to trim that up too, but the Alaska sawmill does a heck of a lot better job. All the timbers in my shop were made with a Haddon lumber maker. They were small trees and stuff that were here on the property, and I cut them up with that. And so it does a pretty good job, but if you got able to set up the Alaska mill, it does a lot better job. Well, anyway, I'm done with it now for the time being. It's funny, these horse flies, deer flies coming around here, they don't bother me when I'm down there running that saw with the exhaust and sawdust flying and stuff, but boy, as soon as that saw shuts down, they're out here in force. Anyhow, the rest of this is going to be butchered up on the bandsaw mill. I'll start out with the one I've got setting up there now, make 2x6s out of it, and then I can probably put the two that are on the forks on there and butcher those up, and then get this one that I just finished. So that's going to be some pretty nice 2x6s on there, I think. Even that one that came out of the heart, once I started cutting through it, it doesn't look too bad. We'll see how they look when I get it done, but they might not be suitable for rafters, but they'll be suitable for other things like framing and stuff, but we'll figure out a use for them. But yeah, there's going to be quite a few of them there. Each one of those cuts is 30 inches. So the first thing I've got to do is break those down into a 24-inch cant. But anyway, that log is pretty well broke down into manageable pieces now. Probably a 3,000-pound piece of wood, maybe more. I know I couldn't pick it up with my Bobcat with just the forks on there. When we loaded it up, when we hauled it out of the woods and brought it home, I picked up one end a little ways and was able to put it on the trailer and then pick the other end up and slide it in. But I couldn't pick either one of those logs up with the Bobcat. So, and that's 2,200 pounds capacity on that, and it wouldn't even budge them. It just picked the back end of the machine up. Anyway, I'm done with that for now. I've been stopping in between every cut and letting the machine cool down and letting me cool down and stuff. And so it was almost an hour for every one of those cuts that I made today. It didn't take me an hour to make a cut, but to complete the cut, go make the cut, go take a break for 15 minutes or so and get cooled down, come back and sharpen the chain up, gas and oil, and get the saw started and get going. Now when I come down to this end, I don't know whether that showed up on here or not, but I moved the saw around and led out with the tip of the bar, and then cut halfway through it there with the tip of the bar, and then brought that back into the cut and come out with the power head afterwards. And the reason I did that is because once that saw starts coming out of the cut, and it's the same with going into the cut, it's only supported on one of those rails, so the saw can either tip up or tip down when it comes in, going into or out of the cut. So I tipped it at an angle coming out of the cut to keep both rails on the wood as long as possible, so we get a nice smooth exit out of the wood there. Doesn't work on putting it into the cut. You just have to hold it up and kind of start going, and then once you get it in there a little ways, then you can correct for it. But the start of the cut is always kind of funky there, especially on a heavy saw. On a lighter saw, it's not so bad, but when you got that long bar on there and that big power head, it's a little more of a challenge to feed in straight. Did a pretty good job on them, I think. Well, anyway, those are some really nice cants. That turned out really, really good. So you go look down those, and they're actually better than what I've seen come out. Well, some of this lumber that's in the cabin up there we bought from a sawmill, Circle Sawmill, and these boards that I produce for the chainsaw mill are 10 times or 20 times better than those. And then on the bandsaw mill, the same way. If I'm cutting, everything's cutting perfect on the band mill. I've got a good sharp blade. My boards come off there pretty good, but they're within a 1/16 of an inch coming off the chainsaw mill if I get everything set up right and take my time and do it right. There's not a 1/16 of an inch difference between width and the face or anything like that. Anyway, that's done. That part is done. And we'll finish butchering that log up on the bandsaw mill.